Hello and welcome to Enchantment of Eternity's review for The Chase, which is episode 20 of season 6 of Star Trek Next Generation. This video is a part of a series of videos where I review episodes of Star Trek as determined by my Patreon user polls. The episode to win my latest Patreon poll is The Chase from Star Trek Next Generation. So The Chase is the episode in which Picard's archaeology mentor comes on board the Enterprise, tries to get him to go on this important mission he thinks will change the course of history, but Picard can't leave the Enterprise, so he refuses. The professor leaves upset, but then the professor is later killed, and Picard, investigating his murder, finds out that he was on to a very important discovery and starts to track it down, and he finds he has some competitors in the form of Klingons, Cardassians, and Romulans, who are all trying to discover the key to this archaeological mystery, which they think is a weapon of mass destruction, but they manage to put it together, and it turns out just to be a message from a species that lived very, very long ago that claimed to have seeded all humanoid life in the Milky Way galaxy, which explains why all the humanoid aliens look alike in the Star Trek universe. She has a message that they are not so much different, and they will probably all get together and live in peace eventually, and the Klingons and the Cardassians scoff at that, but the Romulan commander calls Picard and tells them that perhaps one day it could happen. So, this is a very interesting episode. First of all, the very first thing I want to talk about is this episode reminds me a lot of this novel that came out a few years before this called The Devil's Heart. It was also about a archaeological mystery that Picard was investigating. In this case, it was like this magical stone that could grant someone the power of the universe, and it started to corrupt Picard or whatever. So it's quite different than this, but it's similar in the fact that you had the important alien races chasing after this, archaeological mysteries, kind of an Indiana Jones style thing. And you had a sort of a chase or a race with all the different alien races. Now, in that novel, it was the Klingons, the Romulans, and the Ferengi, because that novel came out before the Cardassians were really an important species. And in fact, reading the background information for this episode, I learned that the Ferengi were originally written to be in it, not the Cardassians, because this idea was kicked around for several years until they added the element of the archaeological mentor for Picard, because at first Michael Piller and Rick Berman didn't believe that this story had enough emotion or enough character beats, that it was just plot heavy, and so when they added the element of the mentor that Picard was attached to, this won them over. And of course, at this stage, this was the year Deep Space Nine first came out, and the Cardassians were becoming a major adversary, and so Next Generation was trying to promote Deep Space Nine by including them. And it's funny, though, because none of the background information or quotes from the people involved, none of them mentioned Devil's Heart, which I wonder if... Honestly, I wonder if they're doing that out of a caution of being sued. Because it seems to me that that would be an obvious inspiration. But instead, the writers quote the novel Contact by Carl Sagan, which of course was made into a movie later with Jodie Foster. I never read the novel, so I can't speak to it. The movie I don't care much for. But they said it's similar because there was an archaeological mystery that they had to put it together, and it was a message from an alien race. So I guess it is similar in that regard. Now, they also said the original script took a lot of inspiration from It's a Mad, Mad world, which has a more comedic note. In fact, the script had a more sort of comedic tone to it, where it had like Klingons, Romulans, Ferengi, and Picard and Riker all beaming together, arguing over, oh, what was this happening? So I actually agree that doesn't sound like a very good idea. And what they did here was actually much better. But I'm still shocked that no one mentions the Devil's Heart. In fact, I went online to see if anyone else mentioned the Devil's Heart, like critics or reviewers. But it seems like it's just me. It seems like I'm the only one who thinks of that. I mean, because I suppose if you take away the whole chase that like all the major alien races competing to find this archaeological dig, that's pretty much the only similarity. When you take that away, the Devil's Heart's actually quite different, because it's about like this powerful stone that corrupts Picard, and it's like can corrupt men, has an absolute power, corrupts absolutely type message to it and whatnot. Which of course is not at all what the chase is, but I still think that base element is similar enough. I was expecting at least one person to mention it, but maybe it's out there and I'm just not thinking of it. And I am certain that the freaking writers read that and they're just not admitting it because of copy. They're worried about getting sued. They don't want to admit that they're taking ideas from the beta canon, from the non-canon material, because that's probably would be considered a huge no-no, because they're stuffed their nose, oh, we're the real Star Trek. That's bullshit. But I think it's obvious they did. I could be wrong, but it's way too much of a coincidence. Coincidence, I think not. Anyway, the other thing about the Devil's Heart, before I move on, that I think that made me really convinced that someone in the show read it, is that it's also because it was before Deep Space Nine came out, and it featured a station that was very similar to Deep Space Nine. It had like a small Starfleet presence. It was mostly like alien marauders or whatnot, and it was a lot of like seedy dealings there. But the station was in command by a Starfleet commander, by the rank of commander, not captain. And so that reminded me of so it seems like they got that idea from Deep Space Nine too. When I first heard of the concept of Deep Space Nine, I was like, wait, this is like that station from the Devil's Heart. But anyway, maybe I'm really off base and it's just a big coincidence, but I don't know. Anywho, so I remember when I first saw the preview for the chase, because if you recall, if you were alive back then and watching Star Trek back in the 90s, this shows in the 90s, they would have like show some new episodes, then they show reruns. And then they show some new episodes and some reruns. And sometimes they have a run of reruns for like... So they would basically air the entire season twice. But they would intermix like they'd start the reruns like while the new episodes were still airing. That way it could go year round, because there's only 26 episodes or 25 episodes. It's not going to last the whole year. So this allowed them to so every single week at whatever clock, depending on what syndicated, what area you lived in, it would show the episode repeatedly. And of course, I'm talking about the United States. I don't know. And other countries, they seem to actually do it the correct way and just play the season straight through once, and then stop it and put another show in its place, which what they did in later years, and that honestly makes a lot more sense to me. But in the United States in the 90s, this is what they did. And so this I remember because this episode came like in the middle of like a batch of reruns. So I was watching like a rerun of something, an episode from season 6 that I'd already seen, but at the end, the preview for the next episode was this one. I remember that very clearly. I'm not sure why, because I remember I was actually blown away by the concept of having like Klingons, Cardassians, and Romulans in the same episode. Although to be fair, like in the actual episode, the Romulans barely appear, but I didn't know that from the preview. I was like, oh my god, this looks so exciting. This is amazing. I remember they showed this episode, I believe they showed this episode in the next, so just 2 episodes, and then they went back to reruns, which I didn't get. So it was like in sort of an oasis out of nowhere. And that's tricky because a lot of people might have missed it. In fact, I think not with this, but I think more with Deep Space Nine Voyager. I think I remember missing episodes because I just assumed there was reruns because it was in the end of the whole like slew of reruns, and all of a sudden they would just pop in a new episode out of nowhere and then go back to reruns. Very, very chaotic. Anyway, that's probably neither here nor there as far as this episode goes. When I first saw the episode, I remember being because I was expecting this like huge like chase between Romulans, Klingons, Cardassians, and Federation. I was like, but instead, like the first 20 minutes was about Picard's mentor, and I'm like, this is boring. But mind you, I was like 14 or 13, whatever, when this came out. So I've grown to appreciate it a bit more, and I do agree with the Redditors that it does add that bit of character story and it adds that motivation for Picard that really truly drives it, but it's not quite the adventure that I was sold on. Even to this day, some people present this episode as an Indiana Jones style adventure, when like most of it's kind of just Picard talking to his mentor, and the sort of the chase thing only takes up like the second half of the episode. But actually, I appreciate it more that way. I do like the interactions between Picard and his mentor. I totally buy it, even though he was never mentioned ever before. I still buy it because the two actors really sell it, and the dialogue sells it, and so you immediately get the sense that these are two old friends, and that they had a mentor-apprentice type relationship in which Picard disappointed his mentor by abandoning his field and instead joining Starfleet. And I actually find it quite powerful that they ended up, because Picard never wavers in his devotion to Starfleet, which is completely in his character, but of course this completely devastates and disappoints someone he cares about a lot, and he ends up leaving in anger, and the next thing they know he's murdered. And at least I will give the episode this: I do appreciate that they at least allowed his dying words to be, "I was too harsh," because it would have been maybe a bit more dark and foreboding if he died never being able to forgive Picard, or at least not forgive Picard for not going with them, and so Picard would have thought that he died hating him. So I think it was kind of the script to do that, because that would have been maybe a bit too dark and disturbing if they went in that direction. Now, one thing I want to talk about the Kurlan Naiskos. I'm 100% certain I mispronounced it. I don't care what it's had pronounced, but it's the thing that Professor Galen gave Picard as a gift. Now, he mentioned that there was like this huge archaeological find, and Picard was like off his fucking rocker that it even exists. He's like, "Will, oh my god, you found one intact, it has everything." Whoa. And then when Galen's like, "Well, it's yours, Picard," and Picard's like, no, how could I accept this? And Galen's all pissy. He's like, "Graciously, Picard, you could accept it graciously." But here's the thing, they present it as if it's like a priceless artifact. Why don't they take it to a fucking museum? Isn't Picard being a bit of a, grave robber, or, cultural stealer? I guess they're implying maybe this culture doesn't exist, or there's no living culture at descendants of this culture in existence. In which case, okay, it would be a bit more understandable. But if they did still exist, shouldn't that item belong with them? Why is Galen having Picard have it? And even if they don't exist, why is it not in the museum? But I'll tell you what angers me even more about this is in the movie Star Trek Generations, At the end of the movie, when the Enterprise crashes and is destroyed, and the saucer section crash lands on the planet, and the ship is completely destroyed and unsalvageable, they show Picard going through his ready room to collect his things, and they show this. Now, when I first saw it, I was like, oh, what a nice callback, what a nice, homage callback to the episode of The Chase. But Picard picks it up and just casually tosses it aside as if it was garbage and goes to pick up his family album. It's like, oh, this is what I want, and leaves. And I remember, I gotta be honest, when I first saw Generations in the movie theater, I was like, when that happened, I was like, what the fuck? There's this priceless artifact that represented the mentor that died in his arms, someone who was very important in his life, and it's apparently priceless. It's a priceless artifact. Let me say that again. It is a priceless artifact. It means it's priceless. It's one of a kind. It represents a whole culture that exists. It's priceless. And he just casually tosses it aside. Now, I watched a couple of reviews of Generations online, and the one in particular that were making fun of people for pointing this out, how ridiculous it is. Oh, not the Kurlan Naiskos. Who the fuck cares about that? I'm sorry, but that is a huge fucking plot. That is like the worst thing about Generations, in my opinion. I mean, why even have that thing? Why show it if you're just going to completely disregard everything everything about it? Like, don't even have it. If you're going to have Picard just, oh, look at this fucking trash. Who cares about this priceless artifact that my mentor gave me right before he died? Fuck that thing. That makes no sense. It angered me. It is the thing that angers me the most about Generations, and this is a hill I will die on. Anyone who says, oh, stupid nerds complaining about minor nitpicks is not a fucking minor nitpick. Why even have it? I mean, granted, like, only people who have seen the episode The Chase or have seen it a bunch of times enough to remember what that is will notice this glaring flaw, but that doesn't mean it's a minor nitpick. That doesn't mean you're a nerd or a geek. Oh, you're worried about some stupid curling nest. It's a priceless artifact. I don't care what movie, what film, if you're watching Indiana Jones and he's like, oh, this is a priceless artifact, and then in the sequel he finds it and he just tosses it in the trash, you're going to be like, what the fuck is going on? Why is he throwing away a priceless artifact that should have strong sentimental value in favor of some stupid family photo album, which is the 24th century? They have tons of photos that are digital that he could access at any time. Who the fuck cares about that stupid goddamn photo album? What? It's a priceless artifact. I was gonna rant about this in my review for Generations, but I don't think I did because that review went on too long and I had too many other things to say about that movie. But that's why I needed to rant about it here. Sorry. Anyone who just flat out says it's an insignificant minor nitpick is just objectively wrong. They're objectively wrong. That's the biggest plot hole in the movie. Anyway, I'm sorry. Alright, getting into the rest of the episode of The Chase. It's funny because I just read that there's a deleted scene because the episode was a bit short, so they added a scene where, because that is line of dialogue where Picard is like, oh, test all the non-Federation members of the Enterprise to see if they have any of the genes, the DNA that matches up with this puzzle. And they had a deleted scene where Dr. Crusher was testing Mott, which it would establish the Bolians as a non-Federation member, but all the other stuff that comes after this, I think, kind of implies, I don't know if it's ever outright stated, but there's tons of Bolians in Starfleet, so I think it's heavily implied that they're a member of the Federation, but whatever. And then Mott's like, as sort of bitching about, oh, blah, 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 blah. And he only appeared in that one episode in some rows. I don't miss anything about the scene. But it's funny that they created the scene just because the episode is short, but it turned out they didn't need it after all. There's one scene that I suspect, when I was thinking about this episode and when I watched it recently, and there's one scene in particular that really gave me the vibes that they added it because the episode was short. Now, I haven't read anything that would imply that, but the fact that I did read that the episode was running short does make me think that this scene was created to pad out the runtime. Even if it wasn't, for example, done after the film. Maybe it was in the original script. But I think if the episode was not short, that this scene probably would have been cut because it seems really extraneous and useless, other than being a bit humorous. And I'm talking about the scene where Data is sitting in 10 forward and the Klingon captain tries to bribe him. And he comes in, he sparks up a conversation with Data, and Data continually ignores him, and he tries to do the Klingon, feats of strength with Data, easily wins, and then he tries to headbutt Data, and he ends up falling back. Now, I will admit, the scene is a bit humorous, but it does seem really unnecessary, and it makes this character, I can't remember his name, but the Klingon captain, it makes him come off as a giant moron. Why would he try to bribe Data, an android of all people? What makes him think that he could actually entice a logical, non-feeling android to betray his crew? That makes no sense. It makes him a complete idiot. Furthermore, I think that Data is acting out of character in this scene. When Data sees that, he can tell if someone's trying to spark a conversation with him, even if it's a guest or stranger, not a normal crew member. He can tell that they're trying to spark a conversation, and he engages them. He doesn't, because in this scene he continually keeps ignoring the Klingon and going back to doing his work, which I think is flat out of character from Data. And so the scene seems to me was just done for comedic purposes, and I must admit I did find it quite humorous, particularly when I first saw it. So I kind of think that scene should have been cut, and I think the episode being short explains why it wasn't. Anywho, one thing I love about this episode is the scene where Picard tells all Council of Troy. This is very cathartic of me because she's constantly whining to Picard and stuff, and it was so great to finally have a scene where Picard was just flat out told her off. And basically is so the scene I'm referring to is when Picard orders this investigation. They're flying all over the galaxy trying to solve this puzzle, and Troy is goes in this office and is how you doing? She I think it's very deceptive of her, the way she goes about this. She goes in the office, his ready room, and is oh, how's it going? And then he talks about the puzzle and how he's trying to figure it out. And she's no, I'm not even talking about this. I mean, how are you doing? And so he tries to answer her question, which is obviously about the fact that his mentor just died. And so he tries to give his thoughts on it and says, look, if I had gone with him, but then she cuts him off and says, you can't think like that. And then goes on this rant about how this is a wild goose chase, and that there's all these, this conference has been settled for months and months ago, and he's expected to be there, and he's shirking on his responsibilities. And, and to be fair, she's done this kind of shit before. So it was so gratifying that Picard, because Picard usually placates her, to be honest. When she does shit like this, he's usually like, I understand, counselor, okay, I'll take it under advisement, but this time he just flat out was like, no, I'm sorry, this is not some wild goose chase, I'm not going to let the professor die in vain, this is a very important find, and if it means I inconvenience a couple of squabbling bureaucrats, and if it means that I inconvenience a couple of squabbling bureaucrats, so be it. I will take the full responsibility. I love that. Now, he didn't actually tell her to go to hell or the fuck off, but he essentially did with the way he said it, because he made it very clear that he didn't want to hear it. And so as soon as he was done, I will take the full responsibility. She's like, all right, and leaves the ready room. Thank you, Picard. You should have done this a long time ago. Now, I remember, I think I was even, when I watched this for the first time with my friends, I think we were even cheering. We're like, yeah! Yeah, you Tom Picard! Because Troy's annoying. I'm sorry, Troy is a poorly written character. And I think that was a poorly written scene, to be honest, because I don't get Counselor Troy's position here at all. She's, first of all, as I said, she like sets him up. She is very deceptive of how are you doing, and when he tries to answer, she outright cuts him off. So it seems like she had planned to go in there to sort of tell him off to begin with. She was just pretending to be all friendly. Oh, how's it going? That's all an act. She really wanted to go there and be like, stop being a pissy little captain and go do your job. I love how Picard just told her off because she's wrong. I think this is a poorly written. I think your character is poorly written, because why would she care about some stupid conference when it's very clear that someone very important to him that just died on this very important quest that could have very serious implications. In fact, I find it really jarring seeing this scene in the very next scene where Crusher's trying to put all the information together, investigating this thing. So she's treating it with the gravity that this situation deserves, or Troy doesn't seem to give a fuck about it. What's she doing on this bridge? She's so incompetent, and he doesn't even deserve to be a senior officer. Get her off her crew. Jesus Christ. She's just being a hindrance. Anyway, I did love that scene, though, I will say. But as for the actual chase, there's not much to it. As I said, like, they find the Cardassians on this planet, and the Klingons happen to be there, and they sort of argue about it, and the Cardassians, I did kind of like how the Cardassians tried to sabotage the Enterprise, but the Enterprise caught on to it, but they faked being sabotaged, but really they weren't, and they were tracking them. It's very clever. I kind of like that. But when they get there, the Romulans are just there, and I gotta be honest, this Romulan element kind of just seemed to pop up out of nowhere, and I didn't really buy the way that the Romulan commander at the end of the episode was, oh, maybe one day. That seemed to come out of nowhere, and it seemed really fake and disingenuous, and I didn't really, it seemed like a way, just to give Picard a big win that didn't seem particularly earned. but it was, it was alright. But now let's talk about what everyone else talks about. What the most, I think everyone, what they want me to talk about with this episode, because it's funny, because I looked up all these user reviews of this episode, and every single one of them focused on this one thing, which I haven't even brought up yet. So it's like the most important thing about this episode is that it fixes the plot hole of why all of the aliens in Star Trek look like humans with shit on their forehead. Sometimes they don't even have shit on their forehead. Sometimes they just look like humans. And it's obvious why that was done, particularly when you look at the original series, which really didn't have a budget. Although, to be fair, the original series did bring you such aliens as the Tholians. But notice how we never really see the Tholians. Like, we only saw them that one time. When we did see them again in Enterprise, which was cool, but usually it's just humans with shit on their forehead. Even in the Delta Quadrant with Voyagers, humans with shit on their forehead. And it is rare that, we do sometimes, there's a Horta also in the original series and some other species. So from time to time you do see some really weird ones, but for the most part it's humans with shit on their forehead. So apparently Ronald D. Moore talked about how Joe Menansky, and the two of them wrote this episode together, but he talked about how Joe Menansky had always been obsessed with why all the aliens in Star Trek look like humans with shit on their foreheads. So he came up with this idea to explain it. Now, I talked before about how I don't really like retcons, or not really, I don't know if retcon's the right word, but I don't like Star Trek coming up with in-universe excuses to explain away what are clearly production issues. The biggest example of this that really irks me and pisses me off to the point where I personally don't consider it canon is the Enterprise episode in season 4, where they tried to come up with an excuse as to why the Klingons looked like humans during the original series. And they say that it was because they injected some Klingons with human DNA because they were trying to do the genetically engineered super beings like from the Khan era and inject that DNA into Klingons to make them genetically engineered, but it went awry and they caused a virus that they were all going to die from. They managed to cure the virus, but it had the after effect of making Klingons look like humans, which makes no sense. Because they made it clear that it didn't make all Klingons look like humans, just some. Then how come all the Klingons look like humans in the original series? And then how come Klingons like Kang, Kor, and Koloth look like humans in the original series, but they look like Klingons in Deep Space Nine? So that it doesn't make any sense. It's just a lame attempt to try. I'd rather just suspend disbelief and have the knowledge, the production knowledge of that is just, it was made in the 60s before they came up with the makeup for the Klingons. That's all I need to know. To try to come up with an in-universe explanation for that is stupid, and it doesn't work. And another example that pisses me off is the Discovery, how they have, like, it's supposed to be taking place 10 years before the original series, yet they have superior technology, and particularly holograms, and they do all their communication with holograms, where the original series didn't have that, and they just used view screens. So they had this scene that was trying to explain away where Pike is like, rip out all the holograph emitters out of the Enterprise, let's just go with the view screens. That's so dumb. I much prefer the suspension of disbelief. Suspension of disbelief. That's a production issue. That Discovery was made in 2010s, and freaking the original series was made nearly 50 years before that. Where where we have already in the 2010 surpassed some of this technology in the original series. It would make no sense for a show in 2010 that's set in the future to have technology that's inferior to what we have right now. So I just realized that, and excuses like that show was made in the 1960s, this show was made in the 2010s, that's all I need to know. To try to come up with an in-universe bullshit excuse for it just pisses me off. And the other thing with Discovery is how they tried to excuse the fact that, again, the Klingon makeup change excuse, where clearly they fucked with the Klingon makeup in Discovery and made them look awful, made them look like orcs. And they tried to excuse it, they just didn't have any hair, because they all shaved their heads because they were in war, and that's why they didn't have hair. Now they have hair because they're not shaving their heads. Bullshit! That's such a bullshit excuse, because it's very clear they weren't just shaving their heads, that was the look of the Klingons. And plus, the Klingons have always been seen in war throughout the original series, Next Generation, Deep Space Nine, Voyager, and they never fucking shaved their heads. So that's bullshit. And Enterprise, by the way, which takes place before Discovery, so you can't say, maybe that's just a tradition the Klingons stopped doing it. Bullshit. Not Enterprise, they didn't fucking shave their heads. It's bullshit. Anyway, sorry. So, this one actually doesn't bother me, though. The one in the chase. This sort of explanation as to why all the aliens look like humans, it actually tracks for me. I don't have an issue with it. Now, it still kind of is an obvious excuse. And it's obviously, it also reminds me of how in Rogue One they try to come up with an explanation of why the Death Star was so easy to destroy, which a lot of people for decades were complaining was a huge plot hole, so that movie just tried to plug it, which I think is kind of funny. They made a whole movie just to plug that plot hole. But, but anyway, this one doesn't bother me. Again, it's obvious that it's just a bullshit excuse that they came up with after the fact, but it tracks. Unlike those other ones that don't make any sense, that don't track, this one I have no issue with it. You had these aliens that were like billions or trillions or whatever years ago, before all this life was there. They seeded all these worlds throughout the Milky Way. So they must have been like super advanced. So I don't mind. Yeah, that's fine. Now, I don't know if, I kind of consider it canon. I mean, it is canon. Of course, anything that appears in an official branded Star Trek show is canon. No doubt about it. But as I said, the whole thing with the Klingons and Emperor, I don't really consider that canon. I don't care. But this I do. But it's never mentioned again. If you notice, it's kind of just washed under the rug, so it's not really important. And in the long scheme of things, like I think it's kind of clever to have that be the key to what this archaeological puzzle was. But it doesn't really matter. I think I could have lived my whole life without any explanation as to why all the aliens in Star Trek just look like humans with shit on their forehead. Again, I would just chalk it up to the suspension of disbelief as a production thing, because they couldn't have the budget to have these weird looking aliens all the time, and it would make it too hard for the audience to relate to it, so it just made more sense for them to be talking to aliens with shit on their forehead. And that'd be fine. So I didn't need an explanation for it, but again, the explanation they gave us does make sense, and it doesn't actively interfere with shit and not make sense like the three examples I gave before, which all of them do not make sense. They don't work. I reject them wholeheartedly. But this one I don't. This one I'm okay with. Although it is interesting to know that the founders created all life. Sorry. I had to make that joke because the same actress who plays the alien shows up in the message is the one who plays the female changeling in Deep Space Nine. In fact, it's very similar. Like their makeup is even similar, and the way she talks is similar. It's obvious that they cast her in Deep Space Nine based off of her appearance there. But apparently that actress was friends with Renee Auberjonois, and he kind of recommended her as well. But yeah, it's weird because this is such a benevolent, friendly, mother of all life in the universe, whereas the female changeling was a genocidal sociopath who literally committed genocide several times and tried to conquer the entire galaxy. So it's weird that these two characters look and sound and act so similar, yet they're so entirely different to the core. But I do appreciate that. That's cool. So yeah. And I don't know about that being the answer to the puzzle. It does, to me, it's okay, as I say, I don't have a problem with that explanation, but it kind of makes the episode less interesting. It kind of would have been more, I think the concept of something like Devil's Heart, where it's this powerful stone that corrupts people, actually might have been more interesting than it just being a message from the founder about how they created all life in the galaxy. Just to excuse why, everyone looks like humans with shit on their forehead. But whatever, it's fine. So anyway, my rating for The Chase out of 10 is an 8, extremely good. It's a low 8 because I was thinking 7, but I think I'll give it a little bit of a bump because I like the relationship with Picard and his professor. Oh no, I gotta give it a bump from 7 to 8 just for the scene where Picard tells Troy off. That was so awesome. And as I said, they did do some clever things with, having a conflict between Klingons, Cardassians, Romulans, particularly with the Enterprise. Like, the Cardassians trying to sabotage the Enterprise, but Picard, like, finding out about it and tricking them. Like, that's clever stuff. And yes, there was some heart to this episode. And, fuck Generations for ruining it. Anyway, that's it for my review of The Chase. Thanks so much for watching. Be sure to check out my channel as I cover many more Star Trek. And if you would like to vote in polls like this and get lots of other bonus videos, early release videos, and whatnot, and of course my everlasting gratitude, you could support me on Patreon. There's a link in the description below. You can support it however much you want. There's 3 different tiers to choose from where you get various rewards and whatnot. And as I said, my everlasting gratitude, because it really helps me out. Anyway, otherwise you can just subscribe, leave a comment, leave a like. All that helps the channel as well and is also very much appreciated. And be sure to check out my channel as I cover many other shows like The Expanse, Better Call Saul, and more. So be sure to subscribe so you can keep up with all of that. And thanks a lot for watching.